All right, I'm now recording.
Okay, thank you.
Fortunately, most of what I've said is in those notes, and I'll post the notes,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Yeah, okay. Now I was going to uh, try to create a new, let me see, P. There we go. So now to create a new project, we're going to select Java Enterprise. And that gives us this dialog over here. The first thing we do is make sure that our project SDK, our Java JDK, is set to 10. The EE version, which is the Enterprise Edition, is set to 8, which is the most current one. And you will not have this in there like that. You have to create, say, new, and you select, here's a whole bunch of similar servers, but of all of these, the most popular by far is Tomcat right here. So you select Tomcat server. This little window comes open, and you click on this folder, and then you go find where you installed that um, Apache Tomcat, which on mine is users, bill, documents, Brookhaven, advanced Java, and then there's Apache, which I just showed you where I installed that a moment ago. And when you click OK, that will populate these other two windows, 9.0.12, and it says the base folder is right there, whatever that says, which is seems to me to be a duplicate of what's up there. And then you will click OK, and that will then show up just like this in yours. And additional libraries and frameworks, the only thing that you need to click down here is Web Application 4.0. Don't need any of these others. See up here, we got a lot of Spring stuff, and there's Java server faces and a whole bunch of other stuff, but all we want right now is just a web application. And then we say next. Okay, now you find the directory where you want to put it. And I want to put my project in advanced Java, and I'm going to call this lesson 9A. Since I already have a 9, you will use lesson 9 there. And then you hit finish and put that into a new window. Okay, and there's the new window, except it, yeah, there we go. Now, it's, if we expand this out, here's our source folder, blue source folder that we're used to. We right click on that. I want to create a new package, call it edu.dccd.lesson9. That's the package where I'm going to put my Java source. And there's that package. Also down here, you'll see a web folder. This is very important. It contains within it a folder called web-imp for information. And inside of that is a very important file called the web.xml file. If I open that, and then it's pretty empty right now. And this, I'm not sure how much XML y'all have seen, but this is just the beginnings of the web XML file. Notice it's version 4, and then here's the other stuff that it's got to have there. And you will be adding stuff, as I'll show you in a few minutes, in between this first stuff and then the end web app tag. Okay, we'll get back to that in a little bit. I'm showing you how to start a project now, and then I'm going to move over to my completed project and show you some things over there. The other thing that it gives you is an index.jsp file. Now, with a static web page, most web servers, if you don't tell it what web page you want, will look for an index.html. A Tomcat and the other servlet JSP engines look for an index.jsp. If it doesn't find one, that it will look for, I think, an index.html and render a static page. Or you can specify in that web XML a whole list of possible home pages that you want it to look for. Okay, but this is the most common one, an index.jsp. And if I open that up, here is the skeleton of the index.jsp file. It has a comment at the top that's not terribly important. But if you look here, it looks kind of like an HTML page, except it has this one line at the top. Let me show that. This less than % is the indicator for a JSP expression. And here's the ending of it over here, the % greater than symbol. And the directive, this is a directive, it has an @ sign there. And the directive that it's trying to specify is the page directive. And it says the content type that it's going to have in this page is text/HTML. And the character set is UTF-8, and the language is Java. And you don't have to worry about that much because it's all generated for you. But then you have a skeleton of an HTML page. And $end. Not sure what that does. But anyway, that's the basic basis of an index.jsp page. So now now you're going to create your Java servlet in that folder, and you're going to create your JSPs in that folder. And for this exercise, you're only going to have the one index.jsp. So now the next thing that you want to do is go back to your lesson 1 or 2, and we're going to pick up some stuff out of here. We need these images, because guess what? Your assignment this week is to create a rock, paper, scissors game using a Java web servlet with a JSP page. If you hadn't figured that out. And so we're going to copy those over here to, no, I don't want to move it. That's going to move it. Let's do a Control-C and then come over here to the WebInf and say copy those specified files into that folder. So there they are. The next thing that you need out of here is go down to here and pick up your RPS util and copy that and bring it over and put it in the lesson 9 folder. Okay? And we're actually going to use this Java class from our server. It's going to be our service, they call it. So we're going to use that just like we did previously in lesson 1 and lesson 2. We're going to call it to determine the winner. And that's what you need out of this. And so you're going to put the RPS util into that folder, into the lesson 9 folder, and you're going to bring these 3 images over. Now, at this point in time, I recommend that you probably, what you want to do, I think, is actually create, and you don't have to use IntelliJ for this. You can use any other editor that you may have that you've used to create web pages before. You may have used Visual Studio Code. There's one called Atom, which is a very good web editor where you can change the web page and the CSS, and it has a live re-render. So you click on an icon and it shows you what that page looks like right then. And then you can flip back over and tweak the HTML and the CSS and click the live render button, and it will show you what that page looks like. So however you create the web page is up to you. But I recommend that you start out with an index HTML and some type of style sheet file. As you will see, if I close lesson 9A there and show you over here, I have a style CSS file that I created specifically for this. But if you're familiar with Bootstrap, feel free to use Bootstrap. We say bootstrap.org. I believe I got it wrong. Yeah, search. Bootstrap front end framework. This is bootstrap.com. And this will help you build responsive mobile-first projects on the web with the most popular front-end component library. It has an HTML, a CSS, and a JavaScript components to it. And what you're really interested in is just the CSS file, if you want to use it, because it is fairly extensive. And if you don't know it, I wouldn't bother learning it. But if you have worked with it before, you can put a link in your HTML and reference it and load it with this one line right here. Not sure what all that had integrity. Oh, that's the, yeah. So, but it will allow you, it will do all kinds of neat things if you know how to do it. It can, it has a lot of different components. It does different colors. It just by specifying, and you use the CSS by using classes from that Bootstrap CSS file. And if you call an alert warning, that will give you a red page. If you say primary, it'll give you a blue line. It has badges, what he calls badges. It has breadcrumbs, which what breadcrumbs are is as you go down a menu hierarchy, a navigation hierarchy, it shows you the various menus you went through. It also does a very good job of formatting buttons. You can specify a class BTN, and BTN primary will give you a blue button that looks like this, and put whatever word you put in there into that blue button. If you specify button secondary, it's gray. A button success is green. Button danger is red. Warning is yellow, and a light blue is info. And it also has a button light, which is this white button here that when you hover over it shows a little gray. And then you got dark, and then you got a button that is a link. So this is just some of the things it can do. It can you can use it to create button groups like this. Yeah, cards. What are cards? I don't know. It doesn't give you a very good example. I guess that's the card. It can create carousels, and what carousel is usually is a set of slides or images that you rotate through. It will can collapse things, can create drop downs of different types. It create forms, create some very nice looking forms. Jumbotron, what that gives you is a very big banner across the top. Here's your nav bar. Let's see, you can use this to create a menu. It will take care of pagination for you. That's if you have a whole list of things that take more than can be listed on a page, it will put the buttons on there to navigate back and forth between pages, and it doesn't have to go back to the server to get that information. It's already got it. List groups, tooltips, etc., etc., etc. It's a very nice framework if you want to use it. If you're familiar with it, you might just pull in the CSS file from it and use it. Otherwise, you have to kind of write your own CSS to make your page look good. Now, see, here's the style sheet that's open right here. My button's 100% width, and they align the items center. The body box 64 by 64. This is the styling that I put on my images, because those images render at 64 by 64.
Is the style sheet something like a template?
No, a style sheet is the way originally people wrote HTML and they put all their styling into the HTML itself. You wrote a style tag and you said align dash center, and you said font equals extra large and stuff like that. But then they decided, well, a better way to do that is to separate the content of what goes on the web page from the actual styling of how it looks. Okay, and so you reference things in the style sheet by a class or an ID, which let me show you some examples of that. Here is my and I'm not a great web designer, so I struggled with this, but we use things called divs that are a container, they're boxes, whatever, and you put divs inside of divs, but you give the div an ID, and this box, this position is referred to as left, and the class that it references is side by side. And those, if you look over here, here is the styling for a side by side. It floats left, the width is 190 pixels, the margin of 5 pixels in between, a padding of 5 pixels, and aligns the content in the center.
Okay.
And what that does is it puts this div and the other div side by side, as you'll see in a few moments when I run the program.
Oh, so it just
Well,
kind of cuts down the code. So you
well,
can
it
put side by
separates.
side, and you don't have to write the float, the width, the margin. You just
Yeah,
put
it
side by
separates your the content from the styling.
side.
Basically, what it does. It's not very easy to get things in HTML to look the way you want them to look without using a style sheet. And there's some basic information in the book, which I'll show you in a moment. But you can also reference all kinds of tutorials online on how to do style sheets and so forth. And this is a fairly simple screen, so we can. I think you can get it done. So anyway, that's that. And let me. And now the way once you get your index.jsp to work, okay. The other thing you got to do is, and I've spelled this out in the notes in the web.xml that I showed you. You have to create some tags. You have to create a servlet tag which contains a servlet name, and my servlet is called RPS servlet, and there it is.
Is there any way you could just open it all the way up?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you put a servlet class and you spell out the full path name, the folder, the package name, not the module, the package, including the servlet name, and that's the class that servlet represents. And then for um, each button on the screen will be within a form, and as part of that form, you tell it submit, and you give it a notation, which I'll show you in a moment. But for each one of those, you specify a servlet mapping. So if your button says /rock is the, and I'll show you it in a minute, it says to call this RPS servlet. So then it looks up here to this servlet name, RPS servlet, and determines there's the class name that it's going to execute if you ask for /rock. If you ask for /paper, you get the same one. If you do /scissors, you put the same one. And the reset button, again, is purely optional. You don't have to have it. Okay. Now let me show you. Okay, how do you run this thing once you got it all written? You go to the index.jsp, you right click, and you say run index.jsp. Now in the window down here, this output, it's going to start up Tomcat, Okay, it's still building everything. See my little colored indicator bar over here. Now, it cleared the output from my previous one, and now it says it's using Catalina Base, Catalina Home. All of those are part of Apache Tomcat. And then it gives you all of these lines and says it's connected to the server, and it's created a WAR file, which is like a jar file, only it's a web archive, and it's deployed that that WAR file to Tomcat, and Tomcat has then opened up that WAR file, and it has rendered the index.jsp page, see, on port 8080. And localhost says that you have the server running on your local machine. And this is what my simple web page looks like. And I worked this afternoon, and I could not get these rock, paper, scissors title here to be in the same font as this. Same size, etc. Just couldn't do it. I don't know why. But here are my buttons. If I click on the rock button, there it says it's a tie. If I click it again, it chose put the rock here, and the computer chose paper, and paper wraps rock. You did all this back in lessons 1 and 2, only we're doing it as a web application here. Click on paper, and notice that it puts the /paper here in the URL. So we're using a GET request. It puts that information right up here in the URL. And if you click on scissors, it puts scissors up there. If you click on rock, it puts rock up there in the URL. And if you click on reset, it puts reset up there in the URL. Okay? So now let's go back and look at and see these servlet mappings are what tells Tomcat what servlet to execute. We only got one in this case, but you still have to do this. Okay, so now let me show you some of the RPS servlet. It looks like a Java program, and it copies in this javax.servlet stuff, and that came in. How do I? Interesting. I have a POM file on this. And I guess, yeah, I put the Apache Tomcat dependency into the POM file. So that's how it gets all of that, those import statements, I think, is through this dependency right here. You notice we downloaded 12, and my dependency says, whoops, 11. So we can update that because we're running 12, so I might as well use 12 to compile everything. Now back to the servlet. So that's where all of these imports are gotten. And there's our random. Here's our import static of the other utility class. Now you have to put in this annotation to tell Java that this is a web servlet. And the name of that web servlet is edu.dcc.lesson9.rps servlet, which is exactly what I told it in the web XML file right here, the class, see? Then when you're writing a servlet, you say public class and that name, and this extends I don't recall whether it's a class or an interface. I think it's a class, HTTP servlet. which is imported up here. And then here's my constants for rock, paper, scissors, and let's play, and scissors, and then there's my image array that I used previously. And then here's the strings that I used previously. And okay, now I mentioned that there are two types of requests, GET, and two primary types of HTTP requests. They're GETs and they're POSTs. So what ordinarily you will see in a servlet, if there's not, basically it doesn't matter how it's requested, then you can, if you do a POST type of request in your form, it will call the do post method. Well, I'm sorry, it will call it, if you do a do get, it will call the do get method here. And the Tomcat passes it the request and a response, which are just areas that have information in, or you put information in it. And it throws a servlet exception and possibly an IO exception. But what I did in the do get is I immediately call the do post method with the same request and response. And then here is the do post, which means it doesn't matter how you reference this servlet, even though I called it with a get request, it's going to end up down here in the post. And in the post, I got the computers selection. Then I did a switch, and this uses the request information that Tomcat passes, and I called a method called get request URI. And what that does is it tells you what was put in that command line. And if it's /rock, then I'm going to call the set labels method with the rock constant and the computer selection up here. If it says paper, I'm going to call set labels with paper and computer. And if it's scissors, it calls the scissors. Otherwise, it says it does the reset method. When it comes back from the set labels or the reset method, this is how we get our output back out. We're creating the response now, but what's interesting is we do it in the request. So we say request.setAttribute. The attribute that we're setting is RPS result, and we put the fields in the program called result into that attribute. Basically what this is a map. We studied maps. This is a hash map or a tree map or something within Tomcat, which it gave you as part of this request. And you put things into that map using a set attribute. So we're setting the key is RPS result, and the value is the contents of this field result. We set an attribute in there called RPS rule. The rule. We set an attribute in there of left image, and we put the user image in there, and the right image. We put the computer image there, and then we say request get request dispatcher, and we tell it what JSP we want to render our output. Happens to be the same one. There's only one in this program. If you were writing a web application, you would have many JSP pages, but in this one we just have the one. And then we say dot forward to that JSP and pass it that same request and that response. And now we have exited the servlet and it's gone to the compiled JSP page. Now, I don't know if I can find it. No, it's not here in IntelliJ, but I can show it to you. If we go out here, see if I can find it. It's been a while. Go to Apache Tomcat, and if we look into work folder, it's empty. Okay. Web apps. Root. There's our index.jsp page. There's the WebMF and the WebXML that we created, I believe. But okay, I guess I can't show you. I think what is happening is, not sure. Let me look one other place. As I said, I already had Apache Tomcat installed as 908 over here in the home directory. Let's see if I can find anything in here from previous runs. Within work, there's Catalina, localhost, and root, org, Apache, JSP, and looky here. I'm not sure whether this is the same program, but Tomcat converted this JSP, index.jsp, into a Java program. See it over here on the right. I can, that didn't help much. And it's rather mixed up one. See, there's a map. Yeah. Okay, but from the JSP, it actually created a Java file and compiled it into a class file. So the JSP code gets translated and compiled into a servlet. Everything's a servlet, basically, in the Tomcat world. It may be a specific type of servlets or different kind of servlets, but they're all basically servlets. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that the first time that Tomcat gets a hold of a JSP page, it translates it and compiles it into a servlet. Okay. But at that point in time, we are done in the servlet, and there's some more code past this. And you know, there's the set labels and the reset methods, but I'm going to leave those to you. They're basically the same type of code that we used previously. In this case, if you'll recall, the RPS util returns the result and the rule separated with two new line symbols, so that the set label routine has to pull those two fields out of that string. It had to split the string, get rid of the new line symbols, and so that it can create a field result which contains just that result string and just the rule string, so it can put them into the response. But here is all of the servlet code. Questions? I'm sure you've got thousands of questions but you just don't know what to ask because
Yes.
it's all new. And see, there's my referencing my style sheet and so forth. Now let's get out of that. Here's my notes again. I said for this assignment you need to create the servlet in the Lesson 9 folder and an index.jsp style sheet in the web folder. Depending on your web design experience, I suggest you create an index.html, and then if you know Bootstrap, you may use that. You can use any editor. So you work with the index.html and the CSS files until they give you a web page that looks like you want it to look like. Use 3 buttons that say rock, paper, scissors, as you did in lesson 1 and 2. And again, the reset button is optional. And use a browser to render that index.html file to view how it looks. And I said make it as simple or as fancy as you like. After you're satisfied with how it looks, you rename the index.html file, there's a misspelled word there, to index.jsp. So you change the extension from HTML. Can't change that right here, I guess. To index.jsp. Each button must be within a form tag and have a unique action like /rock, paper, scissors. There must be 2 IMG tags for the user and computer images, and 2 places for the result and rule responses. And those responses and the images too use this JSP symbol. This right here, RPS result, is what we put in the servlet. Where is it? See, the attribute that I put into the request here is RPS result, RPS rule, left image, and right image. And the way that you reference those in the JSP is by saying $, percent, RPS result, final brace, or $, percent RPS rule, or $, not percent, $, brace, left image, or whatever I called it. What did I call it in here? Yeah, left image and right image. So those 4 things have to match in your JSP where you want them to be rendered. But once you create your web page, make sure it looks like you want, then go in and add the JSP stuff that you have to add, which is look into 9A is the simplest place. This index.jsp right here. You have to put in this directive at the top before the HTML tag, and then down here in the body you're going to reference those $, brace, RPS result, brace, etc. Just like I did here. There's the right there. I put the dollar brace RPS result right there. There's the left image, an image tag. The ID is left image, and the source is this. And what's in that attribute will be plugged into this part of the web page. Again, I've thrown gobs of information at you tonight, but let me finish this up. Then you can go to work on the servlet. I showed you a look at that. The webxml file and the webm file folder under the web must have a servlet tag with the servlet name and servlet class. I showed you that. There must be a servlet mapping containing a servlet name and URL pattern for each button in your JSP. After you build a project, you start the application by right-clicking on the index.jsp and select Run index.jsp. When the servlet JSP engine is up, it will open a browser window and render your web page. When the rock, paper, scissors web application works, you have just scratched the surface of the subject Java servlets and JSPs. This is really a very simple servlet JSP example that there's just gobs more. But the last thing I want to show you, go back to where is it? The web page. But I don't want. That's your last look at the web page. But here's the web page over here. What I have given you here is the first like 215 pages of this book. This is copyrighted material, but I didn't want you to have to buy this book too. I did, but this is only the second edition. The third or fourth edition is out. It's an old edition, and you need to read chapters 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. Okay, and this will show you some Java server pages. It'll tell you how to develop servlets, give you a crash course on HTML. But see, and you won't use much out of chapter 7, but there's so much more that we could study. Sessions and cookies, standard JSP with Java beans, the Java expression language, the Java standard tag library, and how you can write your own custom JSP tags, how MySQL can be used as a database management system alongside of Tomcat, how to use JDBC to work with a database. So we'll get into JDBC and databases when we get into Spring. And then there's a whole bunch of advanced serverless and JSP skills, and they develop a music store web app. But we're going to stop up here with just the basic beginning. And don't worry about chapter 3, because it just talks about how to use NetBeans, and you're not using NetBeans, you're using IntelliJ. But that keeps you from having to purchase that whole book. I've said read chapter 1, 2, and 4 through 6. Right there I said I changed that from 7 to 6. So don't worry about chapter 7, and don't worry about chapter 3, which is NetBeans. Then I put you a video in here, a 10-minute video on developing servlets and JSPs using IntelliJ. And then here's your assignment. Install Apache Tomcat version 9 and configure IntelliJ to use that server. Create a Java project. I should go change that and say enterprise, Java enterprise project or whatever it said, and complete the rock, paper, scissors using a servlet and a JSP and a style sheet. The web page should look similar to the screens created in lesson 1 and 2. And then you submit that compressed zip file containing the lesson 9 project folder.
अंदर देखो यहाँ नहीं है शायद मैंने नहीं रखा वो आपने रखा नहीं कहा
Okay, are there any questions
Not for me at this time.
that you
I
can
would like,
think of?
but
Yeah.
I would like to stay on after because I couldn't get my module to completely work.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, well,
I think I'll have a bunch of questions.
okay, now remember we are not having a session this Saturday
Okay.
because I will be in Amarillo. We will have a session next Monday night where hopefully you will have read all of this and created your basic project and be well into doing this, and you will have some more specific questions. But I've shown you a whole lot of all of the servlet code is I showed you. The servlet goes on and has 2 more methods, but those are very similar to what you did in lesson 1 and 2. Okay, so there really wasn't anything in those other methods that is that different. But by next Monday night, hopefully you will be either totally confused or just have a few questions.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right. Let me close this and close this, and I will, while I have it and have it on my mind, I'll go back and look at this document in a minute and before I post it, but come on. Save it. Okay. So now I will post those notes out there as well as the recording. Let me go over and stop the recording. And okay.